What's up, everybody? Welcome to Expanded Understanding, episode number 55. Hello, Jasmine. Hello, Willow. Hello, Jen. Hi, Aaron. How is
Hi,
everybody doing tonight?
doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm just fine. I'm excited about music stuff and other stuff that I'm working on. So I'm probably only going to be here until about 9 for like 45 minutes or something because, well, I got other stuff that I want to do. Hopefully, we'll be able to actually share some music with you here soon. I keep on like fucking with shit, but I don't really like record anything at the moment. Maybe I will do that. I don't know.
That
We'll
would be
see.
awesome.
So, I'm when it comes to stuff like this, well, there's never any when there's no due date, I'm like a huge perfectionist. I'll just keep fucking with it forever. So,
Hmm.
and well, it's not that high of a priority for me to record something. I hear it all the time. So, that's
Right.
there's that too. So at any rate, yeah, there's like that and I don't know, learning like some new gloving concepts and stuff, which is always like, I mean, I don't think anybody here gloves, but doing stuff with gloving is always weird because when you first start doing it, you feel like a retard because you just like, you can't make your hands do the thing that you want them to
Hmm.
do the right
Hmm.
way. And it just really like takes, well, it really just takes a lot of time gaining muscle memory and gaining really the dexterity to do the things, especially to do them like smoothly and with music or anything like that. You need to be really good at them.
Hmm.
So, uh, it's actually, I mean, like the thing that I'm kind of interested in learning is kind of like a new emergent thing in gloving culture, but it is like a pretty good idea. But it's using your hands in like a really fucking weird way. So it's really
Awesome.
strange. And my hands aren't really like the best for it in certain ways. Well, I have really short pinkies, and in a lot of things that doesn't matter. But in terms of like doing stuff that's very digit oriented, having one
Hmm.
finger that's well, I mean, like my pinkies are like way shorter than some of my other fingers, you
Oh
know?
yeah. Huh.
So, like, if you're doing things where you're basically trying to line up all of these fingers, for instance,
Oh yeah.
they have to be very, very bent like this. Otherwise, they do not actually line up right there.
Yeah, makes
You know what I
sense.
mean? So, when you start doing like weird, complex stuff, like basically, well, like stacking all of them on top of each other,
Hmm.
basically to create a place where you have three distinct different points of contact, and it's still like hard for me to even do this. But you see how you have three distinct groupings of three. Well, there's all kinds of weird stuff that you can then, of course, do with that because you can use all these different clusters of fingers on all different sides in order
Hmm.
to basically generate effects that can also rotate, and then, you can change different positions of things. And when your hands are just your hands, not too exciting. When it's completely dark and you have extremely bright lights on your fingers, then it's not your hands anymore. It's just a bunch of bright points of light and it's a completely different situation. But this is like the
Hmm.
kind of stuff that, well, I'd said to you before that, like, I haven't really danced with lights a lot in a long time. And
Hmm.
so a lot of the stuff that I do is not really, it's not for lights
Four lights, right?
really.
Yeah.
It's for being in the light. Like, it actually makes use of a whole lot of like really like micro stuff about like curling around angles a lot of times and shit like this. And like in the dark, it's all very lost. So, nevertheless, I don't I guess really like if we're talking about anything that can be beneficial for a person, like if you want to have good confidence levels, you should make sure that really at any point in time in your life you're getting better at two, three, or more, several things that are just interesting to you that just like you can't do them now and you're going to
Hmm.
figure out how to do them because really it's through going through a successive process of being like I want to know how to do that, now I know how to do that. I want to know how to do that, now I know how to do that.
Hmm.
This is really the thing that instills actual logical confidence behind the idea that like I can do anything that I want to do, and everything is a learning process. And if you don't get good at navigating that learning process, which is best done through learning, well, you don't want to like have the first time that you ever take a test be like a super critical SAT test that's necessary in order to get into the school. Otherwise, your life is going to completely crumble. It's bad
Mm,
news if that's the first test that you've ever taken. Hopefully, you've given yourself a lot of tests before that. And through building skills that are really just like hobbies or you just like them, this is really the best way to gain the confidence for that because you can put yourself through continuous successive tests all the time because
mm,
you're actually passionate about engaging in them. You're just doing it for fun. The fucking pressure's not on, all this stuff. There's all kinds of reasons why it's just literally a better learning environment. And through the process of learning stuff, we get better at learning. And then we get better in basically what is not very good learning environments. Like, for instance, having a disagreement with a significant other. There's a lot of data coming in. Your emotions are ramped up. There's plenty to be learned there, but it's also easy to get caught up in the situation and not really be in learning mode, but
mm,
rather be in like resolution mode or something like that. And really, very
mm.
much so, getting good at learning can allow you to basically multi thread the learning experience, meaning that, like, I'm learning while I'm also gathering a resolution. I'm accomplishing this thing, but I'm also learning as I go. And these kinds of things,
Yeah,
like, you figure out how to start to integrate the learning process into the doing process. And when the doing becomes the learning, then you've effectively obtained a core fundamental piece that is necessary, in my opinion, for being what is called autodidactic. And I guess we could just we don't like consistently do word of the day, but if we're gonna do word
mm,
of the day today, autodidactic is a good one. I'm not gonna go search for a thing on it because I can give you the basic gist of it. Being autodidactic is really the ability to teach one's own self complex subjects. Most of the really like what people consider great minds in history were very much so autodidactic. But if you take the time to research these individuals, especially the ones that are really prominent in this space, for instance, like a Leonardo da Vinci, a Walter Russell, people like this, you'll see that the reason why they were autodidactic is because basically they just taught themselves how to learn. And so they progressively got capable of learning more and more difficult things because they had
mm,
basically tuned their mind to learn shit. Not like
mm.
to need a teacher, but it understood very well how to undergo the process of learning. So it could take really anything and just start screwing with it and it would learn about it. So,
Yeah, that makes
nevertheless,
sense.
it's really learning how to sculpt your ability to learn. I mean, I think this is like the most important thing. If there's anything that I really am grateful for the way that my mother raised me, it was that there was such a focus on learning how to learn, not on just like having a bunch of information or memorizing or something like that, but learning how to gather the information, apply the information, use the information, it, yeah, just the whole process of learning. And I think this is really
Mm,
something that we have to train quite a bit actually to get good at it. I think our default level is like, okay, you can do it. But if you really,
mm,
really train it, it can become highly efficient. Your rate of acquisition of knowledge can massively increase. And as this happens over time, certain other things that seem maybe impossible at one time, like teaching yourself differential calculus, all of a sudden these things seem to become more and more in reach. And
yeah,
once they become a situation where it's like, well, I mean, like, I already taught myself differential calculus. How hard could it be? You know,
right.
once you start overcoming shit like that, then the rest, like the difficulty or the, especially the impossibility of learning other topics without having some kind of teacher around, which is in a sense kind of a farce because you always acquire your information from places. Your teacher just changes from being like some person who sets out a lesson plan for you and shit to just
Mm,
being experiences, and like the object itself teaches you about itself, and by observing it and seeing what it does, how it interfaces with things, how it reacts, these kinds of things, good old classical experimentation, then you learn a lot about stuff literally just from itself and just from functionally playing with it. This is how kids really are learning stuff in the first place. I think in the Western world, in the modern day, we very much so then end up kind of down a treadmill where that treadmill is really about like memorizing certain topics, and there's some like concept of well, if you are in 6th grade, you should know these things. And that's not really learning, that's memorization, which I can understand how it is a function of learning for sure. But there's a lot more to learning than just memorizing a bunch of shit. I'm not saying we don't do any of this at school. I'm saying that in the modern day, schooling is mostly about memorizing stuff. If you take the time to dig into the way that we have schools and the way that we utilize schools, where that concept was created, know that the entire Western schooling system was actually created as a functional methodology for training a highly efficient factory worker, not actually for creating, great philosophers, wonderful
Right.
artists, brilliant minds, not that at all. It's actually created to generate somebody who's really good at pulling down a lever and then checking their work and moving on to the next one and remembering exactly what they're supposed to do in exactly the order. I know this maybe sounds far fetched to some people's minds, but if it does, I highly suggest you research that and you realize, and you will come to find this on your own. So it's maybe that's not the best way to be
Well,
doing what we're
it's
doing.
interesting. Like one of the things my dad always told me, I don't know if people have this from people in their life. Like there's a handful of phrases that this father figure in my case, my actual father, right, that gave me these sayings over life that were deeply, profoundly helpful for me to do life, right? And one of them was understanding how to learn and how to get the right answer for you, what you feel like a more thorough answer is, or your perspective on an answer, multiple perspectives on an answer, but also understanding the answer that the school is looking for. So you can answer
Yeah.
according to their tests, but you can also think in addition to those answers and understand you are learning to answer their questions the way they want them answered, but also keep learning your own shit. You can hold those other perspectives simultaneously, also knowing you're giving them the answer they want to see.
Yeah, and that's I mean, if you want to navigate school with good grades, you're gonna need to give them the answers that they want to
Yeah, no
see.
kidding,
Otherwise, it
man.
ain't gonna work out for you so good.
And that's what like school became easy for me in that sense, where like it wasn't that hard. The academic stuff was easy, and I understood they wanted these answers, so I'd give them those. I'd do the homework, learn my own shit, give them the answers they want, so then I can put my energy into the stuff I want to pay attention to in life.
Yeah, and that's probably an effective way of going with it. I mean, modern school, I think basically you should just do the kids' homework for them and give them a completely different curriculum. But that's just
Yeah.
my own personal take, and I understand that that's a lot of commitment right there. The process of homeschooling or really just educating a child is like a big job.
Yeah.
So I understand why people would want to offload that to other places. Really.
I get, and that's in the same vein. I guess one of the things my dad told me was like, how many numbers are there between 0 and 10, or how many options are there? Right? And you could think 10, all right, 10 or 0 plus 10 is 11 or something. Between 0 and 10, there's 10 options, but really between 1 and 2, there's an infinite amount of options. 1.1563827, 1 point whatever. There really are infinite amount of variables within the given structure. You just have to find how to find out to work in between the obvious, or between the lines, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's important topic really everywhere is the concept of relevance, and right here we're just talking about like the relevancy of the answer. When what the school is looking for in that case
Yeah.
is this specific answer that kind of by going there and doing their curriculum, you're axiomatically kind of agreeing that they're going to determine what is the relevant answer.
Hmm.
Um,
There's
so
another word for we're putting up words of the day, but it kind of fits what you're talking about that I learned from my brother's roommate last night. We ended up three of us ended up hanging out all night long, and it was great, and like had lots of conversations and awesome. I slept like an hour today, but I feel great. But the word metanoia, and the definition here is the journey of changing one's mind, heart, self, or way of life. So progressively
hmm.
learning and teaching yourself over time, metanoia, the journey of changing one's mind, heart, self, or way of life. Metanoia. I think that with the actual dictionary definition on there, it has more to do with like religion or something. But this is more of a general definition. I felt like it was more applicable, and I like it better.
um, well, I mean, like when we talk about like a meta, we usually mean just kind of overarching.
Big. Yeah, yeah.
So,
What would
um,
be noia then? Noia, like the etymology of
well,
that.
n noia comes from is literally the Greek word for thought.
Oh, okay. Gnosis, noia, gnosis, same derivative.
Maybe.
maybe phonetically, but gnosis would be Gnosis. This would be Noia, but
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure whether they come from the same place. Um, so what did you say that it was before?
noun, the journey of changing one's mind, heart, self, or way of life.
Yeah, I think really that's really all it means is change. Like very directly means changing one's thought. Changing
Yeah,
thought.
yeah.
So I think we're always basically in a state of metanoia,
Mm.
where I don't think our thoughts really ever become some stabilized thing. They're always being adjusted, even if they've been massively refined. Just now the movements are very micro, but it's always still just slightly adjusting.
Mm. And being
Maybe
in the
there's
place of perpetual malleability in your own psyche and humility and awareness that there's so much shit I don't know that I don't know. So you're
yeah, I
always
mean an
growing and always
argument
moving.
would be made that like when it switches from that space of metanoia where it's constantly in flux and it leaves that space is where it stops being a thought and starts becoming a belief.
Yeah, or a dogma instead of a fluidic framework that's open to change.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, like that's what, in a sense, like what a belief is, right?
Mm.
Like what differentiates a belief from a thought?
I think I mean, just think about it conceptually. So thought being based on the evidence I've experienced in my life thus far, here are my thoughts about that subject. But as new information experiences come in, my thoughts can change. Belief is I've discovered enough evidence that I'm convinced this is how it is, even though I can't prove it. Like it's more of a hard line, I guess, holding to a thought than being open-handed with a thought.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that's where like basically the metanoia stops is when you establish it as a belief form rather than a thought form.
Ooh, maybe like this. So here's a thought, right? These thoughts I'm always circumambulating it, adding information, perspectives, experiences. The thoughts are changing. Here's a belief, right? This
Right.
is what it is. It's like, no, but maybe it's not, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
hold it
it's
all with an open hand.
unchanging then. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that like the thought and the belief are functioning the same, but the belief is unchanging. So
Hmm.
it's kind of lost its metanoic properties.
Eh, well said.
So I don't think if that was the description of it, I would move to say that I don't actually believe anything
Yeah,
because
if that
I
was the
don't.
definition, right?
Yeah, because I don't have. I would say that I enjoy and embrace that metanoic property to thoughts, and I don't necessarily want them to become established in some rigid space. In fact, I actually like when I feel like I've actually like completely figured something out and there's not really more angles to look at it, I don't actually feel any kind of positive emotion. I don't feel like excited or relief or anything like that. I actually feel more like kind of like sadness and like, oh shit, there's no reason to think about that anymore.
I
You know what I
so
mean?
yeah, right. No, I remember like deep places of existential fear of boredom. Like, oh, holy shit! I think I figured out the frameworks for the universe in a way that satisfy my soul. Holy shit! I don't like the fact I've figured out the frameworks that satisfy my soul. That's like now I'm bored. That's concerning. Like,
Mm-hmm.
isn't this supposed to be a lifelong process of like I'm not quite sure, right? But I feel like I've had enough experiences that I'm totally satiated with what I feel like I want to know, need to know about the after, like metaphysics, whatever, to the point of like, oh shit, what's interesting now? Like, what
Yeah,
else is interesting?
that's pretty much the space that I'm talking about right there. Just any thought that you're just like, there's not any reason to go down this path anymore. Like I
Right.
like going down the paths.
Right,
It's not
right,
about really finding something down there.
right. So it's like now this path is no longer deeply enjoyable, and it really has been for a long time. Shit, what else is there? What other paths are there to go down? Because it's the journey of
Yeah.
that discovery or changing or circumambulating thoughts or perspectives. That's the fun part.
For me, it's really like breaking up with like a girlfriend or something, or like
Right.
not
Yeah.
being friends with somebody anymore. But like it would have to be a pretty good friend in order to feel that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No doubt.
Thankfully, the things that I've I ended up in a weird place, and I think I don't know whether it's actually true about reality. I think there's a 99.9% chance it's actually true about reality. But then there's a 0.1% chance that I reserve for I just convinced myself of this because I like the position.
Right.
And
Totally.
that is basically this function of coincidental opposition that like the idea of phase conjugation, which can be explored in innumerable different ways. It really has that inside of it. Like it's such an abstract metaphor that it can really be applied to anything you've ever thought about before. And then it has this interesting property of the fact that you can always think about it from like both sides at the same time.
Mm,
And those both of those sides can basically functionally argue against each other forever if you want them to. You know,
mm,
like how it's happening, how it's not happening, and what that makes happen, and what's now not happening. And you can like sit there and you can do that forever. And it's like it's like you've reached this point where from a meta position, you're like, I clearly have the answers. But from like a micro position, you're permanently going in like this loop of finding a
mm,
new answer, and that answer basically, well, proving itself not entirely true. It's half
mm,
true. It's true from that side of the thing. But when I'm over here, it's absolutely untrue. And that's exactly
mm,
that balance of it's totally untrue over here and it's totally true over there is exactly what renders it actually existent. You know,
mm,
like now we have isolated the object. It's definitely 100% pure right here. It's definitely 100% not even here over here. So
mm.
we've found the bounds of the object, truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's only in that like little flux position where it basically goes from, well, as it passes through the coincidental opposite, that you actually get this boundary. I mean, even just the whole concept of boundaries can be explored in the idea of phase conjugation, and then this entire process ran on it. And you can just literally think about boundaries forever. And like, it's a weird thing because I very much so feel like my mind walked into infinity with it because
Mm,
there's no topic that I couldn't just think about forever. Just
mm,
what's the point in a lot of cases? You know
mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But this required many, many situations of getting done with thoughts and being very sad about that. And then somehow, some way, I ended up finding myself in this position where I realized I basically hadn't been looking at half of reality, and that half of reality disproved the half I had been looking at. And then suddenly, next thing I knew, I was like, oh, whoops, I'm in this weird position where well, I can prove everything I say, but I can also disprove everything I say.
Mm.
So,
So, yep.
shrug.
Yep.
Big shrug on that one. It makes sense though. Like it's weird. It took a while, about a year and a half. It was not actually a very good time for about a year and a half. You you'd think it's hard to make decisions now. Wait till you end up doing this fucking number on yourself. It's impossible to make decisions. The right way does not exist. And that is a very liberating thing once you go down that, we'll call it a rabbit hole for long enough, because at some point inside of your being, believing that it's the right way controls you. It makes you go a specific way. And when you engage that boundary enough, you will eventually come to a place where you realize that there is no fucking right way at all. That does not exist. And you will notice that at a very, like a visceral, deep level. And then you will be liberated to do it however the fuck you feel like doing it, even if it is a fucking giant clusterfuck. So.
Yeah.
But as you're walking your way into feeling okay about that, you kind of feel like you can't do anything right and that there's no way to actually make a good decision. And it definitely is unbelievably ripe for analysis paralysis. So I'm not an analysis paralysis guy at all. Like if I if I feel like I can't make a decision, I literally just flip a coin in my mind and pick one. So like I just do not do it at all. And
Mm,
what a huge benefit that was for this situation. Because for literally a year and a half of my life, I felt like I was literally just rolling dice and going with the highest number. Like
Mm.
it didn't feel
Yeah.
like I was actually making purposeful decisions at all, you know?
Yeah.
So somehow, like when I talk about this, I'm like, man, your life should have gone to shit. But like, really, it didn't, and that was where in there is where the liberation is that there's not a right way to do it. Like it
Mm.
unfolds as it should, even if you're like utterly fucking lost.
Mm.
So, you know, very, very refreshing in the long run to,
Yeah.
well, I don't know. It's all just a big process of basically, in my opinion, of satiating myself with however much I've figured out. I have to get to a
Mm.
position that I feel comfortable with. And, well, I just, unfortunately for me, I like clever riddles a lot. So that's, I mean, what you like is what you're going to end up giving yourself in the long run. And so I can assure you that my satiation point will basically look like, well, if you had a pool of utter blackness, but when you looked into it, you could tell that it was like infinity mirroring forever,
Mm.
but you couldn't
Mm.
see anything, but you knew for a fact there was stuff inside of there.
Mm.
That's where my mind would be satiated right
Mm.
there. It's nothing and everything at the same time. And I basically just imagine whatever I see inside of there. Like that's a great riddle. I love it. I have no idea what the point of it is even.
Mm.
Like I love that. Like that's a hard see. Like if you start liking riddles, you start you start liking better and better riddles, and eventually you get to a point where like well at least I in my experience I ended up getting to a
Mm.
point where like I kind of like riddles where they don't even ask the question because that reveals too much
Mm.
information about the answer. Like I
Yeah.
want to have to solve a riddle just to figure out what the question is.
Yeah.
You
On
know what I mean?
observation of the situation, that you have to even figure out what the even question is based on what I'm observing or
Right.
experiencing.
Yeah, and then there's something to solve. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
really, the first thing, like, it was a solution just to get to there. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
When the knowing that you just because you framed a question doesn't mean it's actually the correct or the best or most effective way to frame that question. So frame the question, try to answer the question to find an answer to that gives you additional circumambulated perspectives. But now you got to find a whole new question.
if you want to.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
So, that therein lies the liberation. Liberation
Mm.
is just a ceasing of feeling like you have to,
Mm.
really. And
Yeah.
when that goes away in any given situation, one could say they have been liberated in that situation. So, yeah. I
Yeah. Even
I mean, I don't
cognitively
really
feeling
feel
the
like I
same
have
thing.
to do shit. I could argue that maybe I'm a little too liberated inside of my life. Yeah. If I don't kind of like unliberate myself through discipline of myself, I probably never
Mm.
get anything done. Ever.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's interesting. One of the things we were talking about last night, like there's a book that Rima, my brother's roommate, was reading, or she's reading a couple of them. I think one was like from some Harvard guy about happiness or being happier or something, breaking it down. But like one of the things, I think it was that book, some of the different dynamics. One of was talking about like the word discipline in itself is bullshit. Like forcing yourself to change, do something. Like the real focus is changing habits and patterns in your life, not discipline. Putting routines and habits and patterns, creating routines, habits, patterns, ritual in your life ultimately that forms the things you're trying to get with discipline instead of struggling to like force yourself to do it. The point is focusing on routines, habits, and patterns, and ultimately that will provide you with the fruit you're looking for from the same dynamic of discipline of forcing myself to do this or that, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, I think they're right and simultaneously have a completely different definition of discipline than me. It's like discipline's
So
not
elaborate.
force. Discipline's not
Yeah.
force to me at all. It's just consistency,
Mm. Yeah.
really.
Routine,
Yeah, I do it
habit.
that way all the time. You could call
Yeah.
it routine or habit. Yeah, but like routine or habit is like a micro version of being disciplined, I guess, in my kind of my definition of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, if you're actually disciplined into something, that's the fucking way you do it. You don't even think about it. Like it's
Yeah.
not even like a habit anymore. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
beyond habit. It's a autonomous response almost, you know.
Totally.
If you're really disciplined into it. But I understand we use this word for like you will receive discipline for that action. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like this format of discipline is not what I mean at all when I say
Mm.
discipline. It's not like, spanking
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
fucking kid. I'm not talking about that at all, or putting someone in jail. I'm not talking about that either. Just consistency. So,
Yeah.
and that's really martial arts discipline. Martial arts discipline isn't really actually about forcing yourself to do things, but a lot of the ways that they engage with that to prove that you are actually capable of being disciplined, you do stuff you don't want to do consistently.
Mm. Yeah.
Because stuff you do want to do is very easy to discipline yourself to do. So it's not very good training ground for discipline.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean,
Mm.
I don't even think, I think the way that we conceptualize even discipline, when we then apply it to like parenting or being a teacher or being a manager or whatever the case is, right? Like you have subordinates. I don't
Mm.
think that format of discipline is even good. I don't think you should discipline people. I think you should be very consistent with the expectations of basically the subordinates, and you should be very consistent about that.
Mm.
Everybody on the team is expected to generate this kind of result, and that result is consistent across everyone, and we make sure that that result happens.
Mm.
You know, but that
Yeah.
does, and this doesn't like where I think we get a crossover is it's a lot of times we use the word discipline where we really mean punishment.
Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of times we use the word, when we're talking about that other kind of thing, we don't use discipline for it. We call it routine, habit, kata,
Mm. Yeah.
sadhana,
Yeah.
devotion. We call it all kinds of things, really. But, you know, uh, I think there's a question to be raised about is discipline actually supposed to hold elements of punishment? I don't think it is, really.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
And that makes
a
sense.
rock
Like I
is
would agree.
very disciplined, but it has never punished me. You know,
Mm. Sure.
it's always the same. Every time I come back by it, it's exactly the fucking same. It does exactly the same thing all the time. Very
How would you?
consistent.
So everything you're saying conceptually, I totally agree and makes sense. How would you? What's the etymology of discipline? Die to break down, division, right? Or dis or not, or like how that actually break down,
Let's see. You definitely have this disciple thing in there.
right?
We'll just look what this says.
Which could be seen as
Uh, According to
good.
this, it actually comes from Latin. Well, it's a mixture of Latin and English. Latin being disciplina, which just means instruction or knowledge, and then
Hmm.
merged with the English disciple, which really is just, in a certain way, a disciplina, right? A person who would
Yeah.
be that. So, uh, yeah, discipline comes from discipulus, the Latin word for pupil, which also provided the source of the word disciple, albeit by way of a late Latin sense shift to a follower of Jesus Christ in his lifetime. So it literally it really just means to be committed to the lesson. You know what I mean?
Hmm. No, Zach, Jacob said, and Jacob's in the chat now, is wind walking, whereas actually YouTube thing, which is awesome. This is our one of our flutery experts in the group. He said, "What about discipline is learning consequences?"
Discipline as learning consequences. I well see. Okay, so let me read this thing here. it says discipline, one word, thousands of opinions. Is it punishment? Is it obedience? Is it rules? Is it enforcement? Is it always doing the same thing? Is it always doing the right thing? Whatever that is. Is it consistency? Is it doing what you're told? Is it rigid? Is it boring? Do you even get a choice? Do you just comply? To understand what discipline really is and what it really means, let's look at the origin of the word to find its intent and true form. The word disciple comes from the Latin word discipulus, I guess is probably how you say that. Discipulus, meaning student. Most people believe a disciple is a follower, probably because of the religious context, but in reality it means student. A disciple is, and I'll make up a word here, a studier. The word
Mm-hmm.
discipline is from the Latin word disciplina, meaning instruction and training. It's derived from the root word discere, to learn. So, what is discipline? Discipline is to study, learn, train, and apply a system of standards. What isn't discipline? Discipline is not rules, regulations, or punishment. It is not compliance, obedience, or enforcement. It is not rigid, boring, or always doing the same thing. Discipline is not something others do to you, it is something you do for yourself. You can receive instruction or guidance from one or many sources, but the source of discipline is not external, it is internal. So I think, like if we're agreeing to this thing, what we're saying is that basically our root formats of the words and our etymology says what it really is. The way
Mm-hmm.
that we end up applying it, I think, is what the beginning of that article goes into, is that we use this word to mean all kinds of things, but there is words for these other things. Like when we say, what about discipline as learning consequences? Well, generally when we're doing this, I mean, do you discipline them to learn the consequences of good action? I guess would be the question. Because if it's not discipline to learn the consequences of good action, i.e., they picked up their room, so they got ice cream, then it's not actually really discipline, it's punishment for doing something wrong. And they're learning cause and effect, and they're learning, this side of it where in the event that I don't do the right thing, I may suffer some type of negative effect. In this format, it is a punishment doled out by someone else. What if discipline is used as a time to evaluate the consequences of choices, whether good or bad? I'm not sure what we're saying. Are we saying could I replace discipline with timeout in that space?
Mm-hmm.
What if timeout is used as a time to evaluate? I'm kind of not sure which usage of discipline
I
that we're
think, well,
like
yeah,
really using here.
I think based on the definition that we just read through, yeah, it would be maybe in this dynamic would be better said if, what if a timeout instead of discipline, just taking the whole paradigm out of it, the put discipline being a disciple of or a student of something. So if you're disciplining a child, really, I guess more it's you're teaching a child what it means to be disciplined, or a student or a studier. So the reflecting your consequences in a way that you're teaching them to think about their consequences in a way that they're studying their actions and behaviors,
Uh huh.
not just a punishment for their behavior. So timeout would be an opportunity if you craft that timeout in such a way, depending on the age of the kid or whatever, that they're able in that time to autodidactically, without instruction, be able to teach themselves to become a disciple of the circumstance that led them to having a timeout.
Yeah. I feel like a
So,
lot of times we people use the word discipline where they really mean punishment.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And punishment isn't intrinsically like a bad thing, but it
Yeah. It's
is
in
it has to have a clear meaning, very much so. So yeah, a
a time
time
to
to
reflect.
reflect. So I mean, if we go to the word punish, then basically we would say part of punish would be from the Latin punire, which means punish, correct, chastise, take vengeance for, or most importantly, inflict a penalty on. You know, so we're
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
inflicting this time. Functionally, time out is time in the penalty box, right? Like if we
Yeah.
if we go to hockey, so that timeout, we really are very much so punishing them. This is what if punishment is used as a time to evaluate the consequences of choices, and time to
Yeah.
think about that provides them with the space where they can functionally observe the causality that transpired right there. And then moving forward from that, they can enact discipline. They can be a disciple inside of that space. Hopefully, they're learning. And then they carry that lesson forward and functionally discipline themselves to ensure that they are getting the effect that they want by managing their causes. And I think that's
Mm.
really like the goal that we're going to. I think we cross over the word discipline and punishment, and then
Yeah.
it gets very confusing there because they're very different things. Like
Well, it's
we
funny.
say like because we're trying to teach them something when we discipline them, right?
Mm.
So, being disciplined, I think, of someone that has the ability to do and look where they are in relationship to everything else. Yeah, I mean, I think that that requires disciplined practice on just literally like to take the time to do that. I think
Mm.
is requires you to be a bit disciplined. Right?
Yeah, and it's like, and there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about that in the same way that a good father disciplines his child, so the Lord disciplines us. But it really is taught in the ways, or taken in the ways we're talking about the schooling, not the punishment. That in the way a good father wants to teach a child how to learn, right? To be a disciple, to study, to learn, to observe. So the same way that our heavenly Father, our own spirit within us, or God, the universe self, teaches us how to be a student, how to be discipled and to disciple in that sense of yourself and the world.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes because of our crossover with punishment, we sometimes use that same piece of scripture to be like, God will punish you. But it
Yep.
doesn't actually say anything about God punishing anything. It literally says that God will uh, teach
Teach you or
you,
help you teach yourself, like
and
to be
you
a
should
teacher or
teach
a student.
others the same way God teaches you, basically. So,
Yeah.
but like, how does God teach you? I mean, God is a very effective teacher. I mean, if we're talking about God as just basically being reality, like
Mm.
it's the most patient motherfucker on the fucking existence, right? It just waits and
Mm.
waits and waits and just keeps giving you more opportunities, more opportunities. It's not really slapping you in the face. It's providing you with enough rope to hang yourself, and you keep hanging yourself over and over and over again, right? And it's not
Right.
really ever actually giving the punishment. It's the thing that comes over and basically is like, all right, let's have another try. So functionally, when you hang yourself, it cuts the noose and lets you give it another go.
Yeah.
And when we say like, oh well, the universe is disciplining me, we wouldn't be sitting there going like it's giving me over chances over and over and over again to learn the shit that I'm apparently not learning or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe I am learning it, but it just keeps giving me more stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
where I think it's very interesting. Like well, the universe. I was talking about autodidactics. We can observe things to learn from them, and the universe is a great place to learn like these functions. Very much so, because it's like it's disciplined on both sides of those, right? Like it's
Yeah.
teaching everything constantly, and it's constantly teaching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like and it's constantly seemingly evolving based off of what is learned from what it teaches. So it's being the student, it's being the teacher, it's being
Mm.
consistent. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
doing all versions of the discipline at the same time. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think like if you try and model yourself after that, well, I mean, if that was the only thing you focused on in your life and you modeled yourself after that, you'd probably find you were like a fucking pretty top tier human being. Really? Like just
Yeah.
that alone. Just like, okay, I'm always gonna do my best to teach other people and do my best to learn myself and do my best to learn how to teach other people, you know what I mean? All the
Yeah.
time. And I'm gonna do this all the time. With everything I do, I'm going to be a disciplined disciple looking to understand discipline, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just super leveraging it, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And that alone would make you a pretty top tier human being. Pretty
I guess,
top
and
tier.
even switching a fundamental perspective, no matter what belief system you grow up in, it's like nobody's out to get you. God's not out to get you. The universe isn't out to get you. It literally is creating an environment for you to become disciplined. That's your choice, though. But it's this perpetual loving father, if you want to put it in that archetype, who's always going to hold space for you to learn discipline. He's not going anywhere, but he's
Yeah.
also not out. He's not out to get to you. It's not even a he, but if we're going to anthropomorphize this, so just
Yeah.
changing your perspective that whatever you happen in your life, you made that happen. That's all you. You manifested that shit in some way, shape, or form. So learn, like just learn. That's all. There's no right or wrong. No shaming yourself and feeling like shit forever. Like process your stuff. Be authentic. If you have to reconcile behaviors and actions in some way to yourselves and your internal psyche or to others. You feel like there's been some kind of damage, but ultimately, again, no one's out to get you. There's no wrong answer. The fact that the more you are aware that you are learning, you are growing. Yeah, you fucked up. You're still human. Like that in itself is being a perpetual disciple, always in a place
Yeah.
of learning and teaching. Yes.
I mean, we could start talking, the concept of a good student. And, that's a very verbose topic, probably for another time, because I want to go play with sounds and stuff. But nevertheless, like one thing that, about a good student is a good student doesn't spend time punishing themselves because they got the answer wrong. They realize that getting the answer wrong is part of being a student. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
no need for punishment. You just
Great.
literally just do it again, and now you know more, so
Totally.
you try and do it better. You know,
Yeah.
you don't need to spend the time to punish yourself. You have to discipline yourself in the true sense of the word, meaning that
Yeah.
like you need to continue to learn, right?
Yeah.
And then it's not about take. There's no reason to stop and punish yourself. Why?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The,
Really, what's the
realize
benefit?
that punishment is not necessary in the world. It's a thing we do.
Mm.
It's not necessary. Like realize when we look at this, to punir means to correct, right? Well,
Mm.
that insinuates that the person who judged that actually knew what the correct way was. Usually not the case when punishment
Mm.
takes place. Definitely not the case if we are a student and we don't know how to do this yet. Are we actually in the right position to correct ourselves? And isn't the best methodology of correcting ourselves learning as much as we can and then trying again? Right? That would actually
Yeah.
be the best way to end up correct. Chastise, really, we're just, this is to tell myself that I am bad, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what is the value of that inside of the learning process? Take vengeance for. This kind of is a usage of it that doesn't even apply in this situation, but I guess like if you're literally leading out on a fucking crusade against yourself because you got the wrong answer, that doesn't make much sense either.
Yeah.
Inflict the penalty on. There's no reason to penalize yourself if you're just being a student. Cause pain for some offense. Like
And that
why do that
the
to yourself?
the place of knowing you made a mistake can be painful enough because you thought you worked out an answer that's going to be an effective habit or something, a right answer that's beneficial for your life. But again, it wasn't, or I couldn't make it work.
Yeah, and the
It doesn't make
punishment has
it
already
doesn't.
been rendered, right?
It's
Because
already
it's
been
already been
rendered. Like
corrected.
it makes no sense to waste energy on additionally berating yourself, shaming yourself, shitting on yourself, talking shit to yourself. Like I think there's an underlying mindset that if I emphasize how much this sucks, how much this hurts, let me tell you, you're such a fucking idiot. You fucked up here. Like then I will learn. Then I won't do it again. But really, like that's not. I don't. That's not actually help. Maybe it does for some people, right? Maybe it gives them the click that they need to actually do it, right? But then I don't know. I feel like the deeper seated changes I've had in my life have been from having grace with myself. I am learning. I fucked up again in this way, and I know it's like I'm still learning. I'm still going to try. There's another scripture, ancient proverb, if you will. It's in the Bible. It's actual from the book of Proverbs. That says, "For though a righteous man or a right walking person, instead of righteous, some religious term, literally right walking for you, functional for your life. You're walking in a way that is functional. You fall, but you're falling forward or whatever. For though a right walking person right falls 7 times." That he rises again. So what makes a person right walking or righteous? That they fucking get up and try again. Even the most
Sure.
righteous person is going to fall over and over. So what makes you continually right walking? Just get up and keep walking, man. Keep going.
Yeah. I think sometimes when we lack discipline, we utilize punishment to displace it in the
Mm,
hopes that that punishment will scar us enough that we won't possibly forget to do it again.
right.
But if we lack the discipline, we will likely do the same thing again.
And then
So
you feel
the
twice as shitty
punishment
about it.
doesn't really get it. What about karma and punishment? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Some might need to feel pain in order to learn. I mean, when we say like the need in there, maybe that is their path. I'm not here to say what everybody's path is. I don't know, but
Hmm.
I know that. I mean, me personally, I don't really do the karma thing. I do definitely do the play stupid games, win stupid prizes thing though, because that's just causality. You know what I
Yeah, yeah.
mean? And until a person does understand that the effects they are experiencing are a byproduct of the causes they generated, they will run into an awful lot of problematic situations. It just
Mm,
is how it is. So, I very much so think that inside of this, even if we just like we take the question out basically, what about karma and punishment? And we just say play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Some might need to feel pain in order to learn. I
mm,
think this ends up being this is a truism functionally about the function of causality, you know?
mm,
Like in order for me to recognize that I should not put my hand in the fire, it is possible that I will need to get burned. Getting close enough that I recognize that it is really, really hot might be enough. But for another person, they might be like, yeah, I mean, but what if it doesn't get any hotter? And then they put their hand all the way in and they're like, okay, guys, I'm here to report back that it does get hotter. My
yeah,
hand's
no doubt.
fucked. Help. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so those ones did need to feel the pain in order to learn. This if we since we already been using the scripture too. It's the whole thing about Thomas the doubter, right? Like the 11
Mm,
other disciples believed that this was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. For Thomas the doubter, he needed to stick his finger in the wound, and Jesus, being a good disciple, being disciplined, teaching, being taught by God, disciplined by God, and disciplining like God would, of course, then provides the space for audience for Thomas to come up and stick his finger in the wound, because that is how
mm,
Thomas would learn. You know what I mean?
mhm,
It's
mhm.
Thomas's choice after he sticks his finger in the wound, and Jesus, the resurrected, and the 11 other disciples who believed in him being resurrected are staring at him, whether or not Thomas pulls his finger out of the wound and goes, shit, I'm a fucking idiot. I'm so fucking stupid. I never do it right. You know what I mean? He could also
Mhm.
just pull his finger out and be like, okay, well, you proved it. I was wrong. And then just go
Right,
on with his day. You know what I mean? And if he
right.
does that, then then he didn't need any pain in that situation, but he maybe needs to inflict pain on himself. He
Mm,
definitely needed to be able to stick his finger in the wound in order to believe the thing, and there's nothing wrong with him needing to stick his finger in the wound in order to believe it. If the other people are disciples themselves, they will help provide the space for him to stick his finger in the wound so that he can learn the way that he needs to learn, regardless
yeah.
of if that requires
One
pain
and
or
what an
or not, whatever.
interesting dynamic too that Christ allowed him to prove it, right? Because the other verses you could say, well, the Lord says, do not test the Lord your God, right?
Right.
You shouldn't want to prove it. It's like he did, and Christ let him. That should
Mm,
teach you something. There's nothing wrong with questioning anything, the deepest fundamental beliefs about your religion, about who you think you are, your identity. There's nothing wrong with proving and testing for yourself to see if that is real. A good teacher, a good God, and that dynamic will let you test that, and you're not in trouble for it. It's not wrong to test that at
yeah.
all.
Yep. I agree with that entirely. So I'm gonna go play with some sounds. Maybe
I,
Aaron's
I'm,
gonna hang
I'm,
around here and
nope, I'm out.
no.
Let's call it a short night. That's pretty condensed content podcast, and I'm gonna hang out with my grandma. Let's do that.
Well, that was pretty condensed. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go work on some music and stuff. Plenty of good stuff inside of here. It's be easy on yourself. Like
yeah,
there's not beating the shit out of yourself doesn't help you get places faster, really. And in the long run, if it does help you get there, it leaves you getting there all browbeat and shit. And then you're looking
yeah.
back on like, man, I shouldn't have fucking done this like this. So, you know,
I got here,
nevertheless,
but I'm all beat to shit emotionally or whatever. Some way you're just all beat to shit. But yeah, you got there, and that's fine. Whatever. But I feel like there's ways, like you're saying, there's
you're
ways to get there. You can love
You're gonna
yourself
get
there.
there. You're gonna
Yeah,
get there. 100%. There's not a chance that you won't get wherever it is that you're vectoring towards. I don't even have to know what it is. You will get there. So,
yeah.
be easy on yourself. Don't feel like you got to get there instantaneously. Tomorrow is another day. You
Hmm.
will have plenty of time to do whatever it is that you need to do. So, I
Hmm.
love all you guys. I love you too, Aaron. I hope you have a
Yeah,
good time with your grandma. I hope
love you
everybody
too.
has a wonderful evening, and we will see you again tomorrow.
Night, everyone.
Bye bye.